Today we're celebrating the Mass of the Blessed Virgin Mary, but it's the feast day of a newly beatified saint. He's not canonized a saint yet, he's beatified or blessed. And he's a member of the Capuchin order, the Capuchin branch of the Franciscans. There are three major branches of the Franciscan order. The Capuchin branch was the reform in the 16th century, which has produced more saints than all the three branches, of all the three branches. And so they continuously have had these men be beatified and canonized almost every year. In 2017, there were two. Blessed Sloanus Casey, who died and lived in Detroit, Michigan, now a blessed of the church, and Blessed Arsenius, whose picture you see here over to my right. And Arsenius, his life can be summed up with a couple of words: a failure, a screw-up, messed up. It was anything but what we would normally hear about the lives of the saints, where they, like Padre Pio, he entered the order, and all those years he heard confessions and received a stigmata, and thousands of people are coming to him. Or Blessed Solanus, with whom he was same year beatified with, who was assigned as the brother who was the porter and talked to people every day, thousands of miracles a day, and this great perseverance in the life. Not this guy. Arsenius was not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer, and the events in his life took him all over the place, and pretty much his life could be considered a failure in many ways, according to the world, even according to ecclesiastical standards and how you would expect a priest or religious to live their lives. So he starts out as a young man in 1849. He's born and grows up in a good Catholic family in Lombardy, Italy, and he decides at a very young age to enter the seminary. So he does what most kids did in the 19th century. They went to the high school seminary, then on to major seminary, did his philosophy, his theology, and he's ordained about the age of 24 years old. But he wasn't the best student. He was good, but he had no real love for studies, and he became a diocesan priest. And he was an okay diocesan priest. He was an assistant in a parish for about 4 years or so, and it was during this time he met this group of sisters to which he was chaplain to, and he was spiritual director to them. And one of them was pretty much of just a crazy lady. She was absolutely crazy. Now, he didn't know that at the time. He was just a sister. Later on in his life, she'll wreak havoc on his life, this crazy lady, which I'll explain. So he enters, so while he's, doing his basic normal work as a diocesan priest, there is a deeper hungering for him for holiness, to truly sacrifice his life, to give his life to the Lord, not to just live the diocesan life, but to truly offer himself in the vows of the religious vows. And so he decides he's going to become a Jesuit. And so after about 4 to 8 years, I think it is, as a diocesan priest, he enters the Jesuits. Bishop gives him permission, he enters the Jesuits. And because he was so bad as a student, here he is, about 30 years old, 28, maybe 30 years old, and he has to go back to seminary. They make him redo his philosophy, redo his theology, and he goes another 10 years before he makes his vows, and he humbly submits to it because he's seeking holiness. He's not going to be proud and arrogant like, I already did my studies, I'm not going back to studies. He entered into it, right? And he went back into formation, and he went through the whole process. And the Jesuit formation back then was not like it is today. It was far more tougher, and you had to do a lot of soul searching during those days. But he persevered, and again, growing in holiness in his life, he, just truly entering into a deeper union with God. And then the crazy lady, who was part of the religious order that he was once spiritual directed to, she left her community. And she decided, without any kind of permission or anything else, to gather a bunch of other women and start a new religious community with no permissions, no direction, no nothing. And a lot of the women that she had coerced to become part of her little group happened to be women that Blessed Arsenius was doing spiritual direction with. And so he got caught up in this mess. So here he is trying to give them direction, he's trying to help the girls, and yet at the same time he's got this crazy lady who's not even a nun. She says she's a nun. Is that familiar to you anyway? Crazy, all kinds of havoc for him. To the point where the Jesuits had it. And they couldn't take it anymore because of all the crazy she was causing in the Jesuit community through Blessed Arsenius and his trying to solve this problem with her. And so after 17 years as a Jesuit, they threw him out. Wow. They threw him out. He was thrown out of the Jesuits after making vows, everything else, because she made life literally a hell for him. And caused all kinds of problems. He had no great success with anything just during those years, but he was persevering in his own interior life of prayer with God and accepting these humiliations with great serenity and great peace. And so he was thrown back out to be a diocesan priest again, something he never wanted. He wanted to be a religious, vowed to God. And so he did his best to accept these humiliations as Christ accepted humiliations, to truly enter into that, perhaps that moment where the Lord had to be stripped naked before the world, and so there he was, being stripped of everything, naked before the world, and left out there. And so, still desiring this pursuit of holiness and desire to be holy, he entered the Capuchins and became a Capuchin Franciscan. And he had to go through division again, formation again. But in great humility, he accepted it, embraced it with great humility. That's probably when he grew that pretty awesome beard that I'm jealous of. And so he enters into this beautiful life of prayer, living a life very much similar to the way we're living here, praying the 7 hours in the divine office every day, spending 2 hours in silent prayer before the Lord, mental prayer, getting up in the middle of the night for vigils, living life of discipline and prayer. In 1800s, Capuchin life was still tough life, and so he entered into a life of penance and prayer. He was now assigned to continue the work of spiritual direction, preaching, doing catechesis with children. He was phenomenal at it. However, no great success. He was good, but no great success. At the same time, though, he was still growing in that holiness and still growing in that true humility with God. And that's what became to be recognized. That of all these failures in his life, he accepted them with great humility. Everything going wrong in his life, he accepted it with great humility. Nothing working out the way he planned it to work out, he accepted it with great humility. And he just always surrendered everything to the will of God. And he went with it and accepted it. Which is a hard thing to do, to will what God wills for us, particularly when things are out of control in our lives. Speaking recently to a priest who was being persecuted and so forth, and he's a total peace because he said, I just will what God wills. Right? We have to truly just will what God wills for our life, and once those two wills are aligned, we're okay. If I can accept the circumstances I'm in, whether I'm a cause of my own circumstances or whether somebody else caused the circumstances I'm in, to will what God wills for it and to accept it and to embrace it with that humility that Blessed Arsenius did. He was only a Capuchin for 7 years. That's it. He died at the age of 60 years old from a heart embolism. So 60 years old he dies, after a life that just didn't seem to do much at all. But yet what was happening, not on the exterior did he do great things, but it was on the interior that he was doing the greatest thing, and that is to reach that perfection of humility. The first of the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Right? Humility. When Jesus said to those, those who are weary and find life burdensome, come to me, and I will refresh you. Learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. There are two things the Lord wants us to learn from him: meekness and humility. Two very, very painful things to learn. Mother Teresa often said that the road to humility is paved with humiliations. And so Blessed Arsenius had many humiliations in his life. And he kept smacking his face on the pavement of humiliations. But he embraced it with great meekness and was able to become the great blessed that he became. Nothing great to speak about of someone who had the stigmata, or could read souls in the confession like Padre Pio, or could work miracles by just saying thank God ahead of time like Blessed Solanus Casey, didn't use his mantle to go across the lake like some of our other Franciscan saints have done. I'm going to try that one day, use my mantle across the lake. It worked for some of the saints. I'll probably sink and drown. Nothing great big like that. The biggest and greatest thing he did was to become little and to become nothing. The hardest thing to do, to become little. Our Lord told us that the road to heaven is difficult and the door is narrow. It's the camel's got to get through the eye of the needle to get into heaven. Unless we turn and become like children, we will not enter the kingdom of heaven. St. Augustine so powerfully said there are 3 steps to heaven: humility, humility, humility. May God grant us the desire to be humble, the want to be humble, the grace to accept humiliations, that we might truly be humble before our Lord and God. May God bless you, and may Mary keep you.